Hello, everyone. This is Dave Goulas, president of Easy DC 3PL, and thank you for tuning in to the Beyond Fulfillment podcast, where we spotlight small business owners, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and we have real conversations about their journey, what it's really like, and what they've learned along the way. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas of Easy DC 3PL. And I'm so excited for my guest this week. I have with me the founder of the new warehouse, Kevin Lawton. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey Dave, it's good to be here. Good to join you on this new podcast journey that you're doing, and it's very exciting to see what you're doing and putting out there in the space in terms of content now.
Yeah, absolutely. And in case people aren't aware, you actually gave me my very first appearance on a podcast. I was on your podcast at Home Delivery World, and you gave me a time slot. I had no idea what to expect. I just showed up. I had the lights and the cameras in my face. We had a quick little conversation, but yeah, thereafter I got the idea. I said, "Wow, I should do one of these," and you were gracious enough to be a guest. So really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was great to get you on and meet you there as well. And since we've been connected, and it's been great to develop that relationship. And now come back on the other side of the microphone, I guess, and be on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to let everyone know, what is the new warehouse and how exactly did it come about?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, the new warehouse, I guess you could say, is a media and now also a fulfillment company as well. Started out as a podcast initially, with honestly no idea what it would become or anything like that. I'd been working in the warehousing industry for a while, a few years, I didn't initially decide that I wanted to do that, or had any desire growing up to work in supply chain or anything of that nature. I just happened to land within the field, and at some point I decided, let me embrace this a little bit. I think that this is kind of where my career is going and building more towards. So I was looking for a way to learn more about the industry, and really at the time I guess I was in my late 20s, and there wasn't really anything too interesting out there to learn from. There were some blogs, and they were very dry, I guess you could say. Not too attention grabbing for someone in their 20s, right? And I just kind of looked at it and thought like there could be a different way to look at this type of stuff. And a lot of robotics automation was starting to kind of pop up. So it's kind of like, oh, like, why isn't there something more interesting or cooler in a sense to highlight some of this stuff that's going on? So initially I decided like, oh, I'm going to do some blogging maybe, because I had done some blogging in the past as a ghostwriter freelance, but for different industry. So I'm like, oh, I have some experience there, maybe I'll do that. And at the time I was working on a project where we were consolidating two distribution centers into one, moving into a new distribution center, putting in an ASRS system, putting in voice picking, taking this company from like picking on paper to 30 years in the future, basically, right? And so I very quickly realized like, hey, I don't have the time to like sit down and write and edit and all this stuff, because I was spending a ton of hours on this project. And then my boss at the time, actually, we had been talking about this idea and mentioned something to him about it, like, there's nothing out there that's really like great for learning or figuring out what's going on in the industry. And he was the one that was like, you should do a podcast. This was like 2018. And podcasting, I guess, was not as huge yet at that time. So I was kind of like, I've heard a little bit about podcasting, never listened to a podcast myself. But I started to think about it and I'm like, oh, it's a lot easier, I guess, than writing. I'll sit down, talk in the microphone, and it could be a little more raw than writing in a sense, right? So I don't have to worry too much about the editing side of things. And I had actually done a radio show in the past at my alma mater about real estate because I had done some work in the real estate world as well. So I had some experience talking on the microphone. But the back end stuff, like I didn't know at all. So I had to figure that out. I ended up meeting somebody coincidentally that had been podcasting for many years, and he showed me the back end and everything, how to do the distribution and RSS feeds and get it into Apple Podcasts and all this stuff. And yeah, and just kind of started from there. And now, we'll be going on this coming March 2024. I mean, we'll be going on 5 years since the first episode came out. And it's kind of took a life of its own a couple months after it started, and totally unexpected. And we've been able to get some advertiser sponsors and monetize, and very thank you to them if they're listening potentially. But yeah, and then somewhere along the line we had the opportunity to actually, one of the guests we had on the podcast, we started talking, and we stayed in touch, and there was an opportunity to do some e-commerce fulfillment for them out of Philadelphia last year. So the new warehouse kind of got a new warehouse, I guess, so to speak. And so now we've been doing e-commerce fulfillment as well. And we're kind of looking and trying to make a push now into bringing additional clients on board going into the new year, and really kind of building that side of the business up additionally, which has been a great thing because it's, like all the people I talk to are a lot of solution providers and things like that. So we've been able to kind of take some of that stuff and actually use it in the warehouse and talk about it. And, that's kind of always been some of the back mission there, I think, is like just educating and letting people know like what's going on in the industry in terms of technology or process improvement and things around that. So that's kind of what the new warehouse is, I guess, in a nutshell, and a little bit of the journey there. But it's certainly been interesting, and it's been amazing to be able to have this vehicle to build out my network and these relationships, and connect with people like yourself, Dave.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny too because what part of the reason I started my podcast too is because I
Mhm.
realized I learned so much from talking to other people
Yeah.
versus just reading a blog or watching a prepared video. When you actually talk to somebody, you can engage and interact and ask some questions, and you realize too that other people are going through the same challenges, same struggles, have the same, similar types of adversity. So I always found that useful, and that was kind of the motivation there. But like you said, you looked around for resources and you didn't find any, so you just started your own.
Yes.
Um, and to see it grow too, because I mean, you've done, what is it, 400 some episodes now?
Yeah, I think we're approaching like 440, somewhere around there right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible too, because as I'm learning too, there's so much to do, and as you get going, it
Yeah.
gets busier. And like, how do you maintain that consistency over such a long period of time?
Well, at first I will say, man, it was crazy, definitely. Like, because I was inventory control manager during the day, sometimes at night too, because we had three shifts. And at the same time trying to squeeze in interviews in between and working around people's work schedules too, and trying to figure that out. And then I was in the beginning, I was pretty much doing everything myself. But I don't have like a background in audio or editing or anything like that. So I quickly kind of realized, like as soon as, it seemed like there was some interest in what I was doing, I went and got an intern actually, to do the audio side. So he ended up doing the editing and putting things together on that front. Because in the beginning, man, I'll tell you, like I was trying to do that myself, and like whew, I was like lost trying to figure that out. So that was like a big help there. And he still actually to this day he still does the editing of the episodes as well, from an audio standpoint. And yeah, and then just over time just tried to figure out how to, I mean, very much like, I come from operations background, right? So I very much applying like that mindset to it, creating like these process flows and process docs to make sure that like staying consistent with it, and able to kind of figure that out. So over time, we're able to really kind of systemize the way we put the episodes together. So now that I've kind of gone, I guess you could say full time with the new warehouse, it's allowed me to be able to take like, I do like batch recordings. So able to really kind of focus in for 1 or 2 days a month and just knock out like a bunch of interviews in that time. And then that allows like, one, the content is created, and then we go and take that, and we know that every Monday and Wednesday we're releasing a new episode, and we have them pretty much a couple weeks, if not a month or more in advance, already recorded. So then we can focus on creating the social media shares, any other components that go along with it, like the blog post. We do a blog post that goes with it, all those different types of things. And luckily, like I said, I've been able to monetize and make it into a business on its own. So I have somebody that writes for me now, and I have a virtual assistant that helps to coordinate a lot of that stuff and manage the project, and see that all the different moving pieces get put together. So it's really helped, I think, if I think about it from coming at it as if I was just like I guess a creator or a creative type and didn't have that operations background. I mean, I think it would be a little more challenging to stay consistent, because if you think about a warehouse and fulfillment, right, your consistency is key, right? I mean, every day, like, you want to come in, you want to make sure that you're managing your capacity, you're accomplishing the goal, like you're getting across that finish line, shipping all the orders that need to ship, and all the tasks in between that need to happen. So it's kind of applying that same mindset in a sense, and creating like those process flows. And we know that, okay, on this day, like, podcast needs to be like first pass edit, and then on this day, like, it needs to be ready, and on this day that these graphics need to be put together. And then how do we streamline almost like a 3PL kind of client onboarding process? We do the same with like a guest. Like, we have a form that they fill out, and then we put all that information together, and we make sure that they're getting what they need on their side too. So it's really kind of taking that operations mindset, I think, in a way, and applying it there, and just creating those processes, so we know that, like, hey, like, it's not, because in the beginning, I'll be honest, like, I mean, we only had episodes on Mondays in the beginning, and there were certainly like Sundays where I was scrambling, like saying like, what am I going to do for an episode? I got to figure something out here, right? And so uh so if you go like back in the beginning, because we mostly only have interviews and guests on the show, but if you go back in the beginning, there's a few where it's like just me solo, and those were the nights, like the midnight set Sunday night, trying to put a show together for a Monday morning release to stay consistent, at least with the release schedule. But yeah, I mean, I think over time, just systemizing, and taking, it's the same thing when you look at automation and creating better processes and continuous improvement. It's I looked at over time, like, what am I doing every single time that's repetitive, and applying either some type of automation to that, or maybe delegating that to somebody else, and just looking at that and saying like, how do we put this together so it's a consistent flow of content that's coming out and getting out to our audience.
Oh, yeah, that's important for sure. And it's cool to see too, like you said, you recognize you have that self-awareness where you have a strong operational background and task
Mhm.
oriented, and you look at how you can apply those talents to this to produce something that's successful. So congrats.
Thank you.
Um, one thing I know that's like, and you touched on it too, is quite challenging is lining up guests, right? And
Yeah.
I'm fortunate, I guess, that I've been in sales my whole life, so I'm kind of numb to rejection right now. So I've asked, no problem asking. But like, what was that like lining up guests in the very beginning when maybe people haven't heard of it, they're not sure, you know?
Mm. Yeah, that was definitely interesting because it was 2019 when I started, right? And at that time, like the idea of a like industry type of podcast in a sense was not as like prevalent as it is now, right? So it was challenging, for sure, because there were certainly times where I was reaching out to companies asking, could you have someone that would want to be a guest? And interestingly enough, I mean, I think now, current time, companies like getting representatives on podcasts and stuff is part of like the marketing strategy, right, and PR strategy. But back then, like there were actually companies that were saying like we don't see the value in being on a podcast or something like that. So in the beginning, it was tapping into my existing network, trying to get people on that I know. Like, I mean, the first episode was actually that was like a cold LinkedIn message to that was Bruce Welty was our first guest, and he's one of the original founders of Locus Robotics, and then also Quiet platforms, Quiet Logistics. So that was like a pretty big get, I would say. But at the time, like I didn't realize like that was like a real big guest in that way, and it was super interesting conversation. But yeah, after that, it was like I had my boss on as a guest. I had like my mom on as a guest at one time. So it was kind of like who was close to me. But what really kind of opened the doors and the floodgates, and which is one of the reasons why I think we embraced the trade show so much now, was shortly after we released the first episode, someone mentioned ProMat. Well, I think it was either like a month or two after ProMat was going to be happening, and somebody was like, "Oh, are you going to be at ProMat?" And I've told this story a couple of times on different podcasts, but truth be told, like at the time, I didn't even know what ProMat was, right? And so I was just trying to, be cool about it, professional, and I was just like, oh, I think, yeah, I think maybe I'm thinking about going, right? And then get off the conversation, quickly jump on Google, like, what is ProMat? ProMat, what is this? And yeah, and I realized like, oh man, like this is like the mecca, right? Or this is like where we need to be, because everybody that would be an interesting guest would be there, right? Like all, every solution provider basically in the industry is at ProMat. So I kind of was looking at it, trying to figure out how do I make this happen. And I took kind of a risk, and I applied as press actually. And because I was thinking like maybe I'm press now, right? So I got a press pass actually. MHI they approved me, so thank you to them. And yeah, and then once that happened, I just started getting like a flood of emails from like PR agencies and stuff that were saying, can your article be featured on your blog or your podcast and things like that. And so, yeah, I took a big risk. I bought this handheld recorder, a little recorder thing. And I'm like, well, I need to go out there and I need to get content for one, right? I need to do interviews somehow. So that was the handheld recorder. And then I was like, but like I also need to like get the word out about what I'm doing, right? To try and gain a little more traction on audience. So I put an ad on Craigslist because I realized that if I'm doing interviews, I'm not going to have time to like just try and promote at the same time, right? So yeah, I put an ad on Craigslist and I hired two girls in Chicago off Craigslist I never met before, that said they had some experience doing promotion at trade shows. And basically, like, I gave them a bunch of flyers and I gave them access to the new warehouse Instagram and just had them like take over, and they went out and like did all the promotion, and I just went like crazy, booth to booth, doing interviews on this handheld recorder. And I think I did like 45 interviews in 3 days or something like that. So yeah, it was wild. And then since that happened, that risk and kind of just that, craziness of, just trying to connect and do as many interviews as possible, that really kind of had the snowball effect, I guess you could say, in a sense. And pretty much like since then, it hasn't been as difficult to get a guest. But yeah, that certainly was like a big springboard that paid off and certainly allowed us to be able to get in touch with a lot more people and build the credibility up a little more.
Wow. It's a great story, right? And so
Yeah.
often you see life working out like that, where you know you want to get from here to here, you don't know how, and you're trying things. Like you said, you take a risk, and
Yeah.
oftentimes too, it can turn out like that if the intention is good and you continue to be persistent, you learn from your mistakes. And wow, look, and you like that jumped it off, and now you're off and running, and 400 some episodes later.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say like I think it taught me too a little bit about like the power of just talking to people. Whether there's a microphone involved or not. Because I think, if you go to these trade shows, because I say like, going into it, it was the first trade show I was ever gonna attend, and it was a little intimidating, right? Like, thinking like you talked about sales, like, getting rejected, like just thinking like people gonna want to talk to me at all, or what's this gonna be like? And I think if you're trying to build your network, I mean, going out and putting yourself out there and trying to just connect with people and just approach them and talk to them and just, simply say like, hey, like, like what do you got going on here? What is it that, your company does? A lot of that can build up and really help you. And you never know, kind of down the line or maybe immediately, like how that can lead to potential partnerships, business, other referrals, all these different things. So I mean, I certainly have embraced that mindset in the overall trade show arena as well since then.
Right. Yeah, and one thing too I've noticed, like in talking to all these different entrepreneurs and
Mm,
founders and whatnot, even since I've been on this journey with the business over the last year, is so many times you'll see someone in their business and what they're doing, and you might have an image or a preconceived notion of kind of what it's like and where they're at. And when you talk to them, you often realize it's a very different story in terms of the
yeah.
challenges they're facing, how their business started, uh, what their road was like getting to where they are. Um, like what's that been like learning from all these other warehouse people and kind of I mean, did you have any instances that strike you where, something was not at all what you thought it was and you found that out after having a conversation?
Uh, yeah, I mean, definitely, I've had a lot of conversations, but I mean, I would say like I think that there, especially now, like there's a lot of marketing out there, right? Like it's super marketing heavy. So it's the marketing I think tells one story, but like when you really get into it, and I think too, in my opinion, like some of these companies are missing like a big marketing story by telling like the founder's story, and what they went through, and all these different things. Like it's easy to see sometimes where a company looks like it's just this company, and they look like they just have some tech that they're put together and are trying to apply it to like the logistics space. But in reality, like you talk to them, you find out that like, oh, like the founder had a 3PL, and this was like one of the biggest issues they faced, and then it becomes a lot more relatable, right? Because I think as we see too, as more and more tech comes into this space, there's a lot of people behind those tech companies, which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of people that don't have that experience from like the distribution, fulfillment, warehouse side of things. It's just that like their tech might work within the space, and I think that creates like some gaps in understanding what the market is really needing or looking for initially. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly been times where I've just thought that like, oh, it's like this big company, and maybe the tech is interesting, but maybe the story is not so interesting. But then like you talk to them about like where did the idea come from and all these things, and it really is quite interesting, like where the problem started, and how they decided like, okay, let's go and develop this solution. That's when I talk to founders, co-founders on my podcast. It's always something like I'm very interested in learning is where did they see a problem initially, and what led them to like create this thing that maybe is like pretty specific to like a certain process within in warehousing. And that's kind of something that really interests me a lot, is that story behind that.
Okay. And your tagline on your LinkedIn, and maybe some other marketing specifically, is making warehousing or making warehousing sexy. Did I say that right?
Yeah, so I mean, we actually have warehouses our sexy shirt, actually, that we were giving out at Modex. We'll have some more of those next year too. But yeah, actually, when I started the podcast, that was kind of like the initial announcement, I guess, in a way you could say. Like I wrote an article on LinkedIn, which people like still send me messages about like randomly. But yeah, so is making warehouses sexy, like with a question mark. And my approach and thinking there was that, so is interesting because at the time when I was starting this, thinking about like how to go about this whole podcast blog thing, as I mentioned earlier, I had one of my roommates from college. He was working doing social media for this car blog, right? And they were doing like a lot of interesting video stuff, like on Snapchat and all these different things, and making cars look good, right? In a sense. And I was kind of seeing what was out there in terms of like robotics technology, forklift technology, all these different things. And in my head, I'm like, hey, like, some of this stuff is pretty cool, right? It's pretty sexy in a sense. I mean, what's sexier than a streamlined, efficient, well operating distribution center, right? But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like that idea is like, how do we highlight this stuff in a more modern, cooler, sexier type of way. And just kind of that kind of stuck with some people. So we've kind of stuck with that tagline for a little while now, and we'll be probably pushing that a little more into next year, as we get more up on the shirts and merch and things like that as well.
Yeah, that's a great tagline too. And like you said, um, streamlined, efficient, operational. There's such a large segment of the population that is
Mm.
wired that way and that works in the logistics field. And like you said too, when you started this, there weren't really other blogs or podcasts or platforms that really captured your interest as someone that's kind of into all that stuff. So you started your own, and that's just evidence on how it's grown too. That a lot of people resonate with that as far as like they want someone to talk about the nuts and the bolts of it, specifically how to operate an efficient warehouse in a way that captures interest and that is fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. I will say too, like, not everybody loves the warehouses are sexy. We were giving out stickers at Promat earlier this year, and yeah, and like one guy was like, "Whoa, like this is taking it too far." He like refused the sticker. So I know that I mean, I guess, sometimes like that's a sign that you're onto something, right? If people are resistant to it a little bit, maybe they say. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important to us to be able to highlight all these different things that are happening within the industry. And I think for me too, something like that I'm passionate about is because we see certainly this shift over the last few years has been more and more prevalent, is that when you look at the labor situation within warehousing, I mean, you have the idea of going to work in a warehouse as like a desirable job or a career type of job has kind of gone away a little bit. So I feel like, and I feel like part of the issue is that some of the cool stuff that's happening around technology and things like that within the warehouse is not being put out there as much as possible. So that's been something we try to do to be able to highlight that to younger people, and get them like more interested in what potentially could be there. And I think additionally, like, you see these things happening, and like they are cool, like they are sexy, like, so let's highlight them, and let's make people aware. And I think additionally, like, you see, and this was kind of one of the realizations I came to when starting this, was that, hey, if I worked for the same company, in their distribution network, warehousing network for the next 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be, like, I may only be exposed to a limited number of potential solutions because my company is only putting so much thought or idea or investment into innovation and things like that. So it was kind of like, how do we get those individuals to be able to see more that's out there, and be aware of more solutions that they could potentially adopt and put into their operations to make their make their lives better, essentially, and make their operations run better and be more competitive as well. So it's been really great when we hear from people that tell us that, like, hey, like, we learned about so and so company on your podcast, and now we're exploring putting them into place in our operation. Or even we had early on, we did an episode with somebody from Six River Systems, and later on, like, I ran into him at a trade show, and he was like, man, he's like, everybody that's young coming out of school that comes in for a job interview, like, they reference that podcast episode in their interview. So like, that type of thing is really, that's really the big underlying mission is to educate and bring more exposure to the industry and what's happening in there. So when we hear those kind of things, I mean, it's really, it's really rewarding. It feels good to be able to bring that kind of light on the industry and things that are happening within the industry as well.
Yeah, that's got to feel so good, right? Because you're doing this to basically not only to learn, but to spotlight what's going on and to help others learn. And then when you hear someone that you had on talk about how the type of positive impact being on your podcast did for their company, I mean that's gotta certainly be gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and you mentioned you're now a 3PL owner
Yes.
with your own warehouse. So what's that process like going from kind of working in warehouses and having the media company now to operating your own 3PL?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, definitely. I've always worked in my career. I've been working in warehousing for I guess like about 12 years now. And I've always worked as a warehouse manager. Inventory control was a big part of my career focus, but working for other companies, right? And I found increasingly that the more I did the podcast and the more that I learned, the more things that I wanted to do like internally with these companies. But when you don't own the company, you can only go so far, I guess, right? Because it's not really like your wallet, I guess, in your sense, or maybe you don't share the same mindset or things like that on the way certain things should go or what solutions to look at. So yeah, so when the opportunity came up to do fulfillment for somebody, it was definitely something that was pretty attractive because I wanted to do my own thing for a long time. I went to school and majored in entrepreneurial studies actually. So yeah, so it was a great opportunity, was obviously within my realm, right? Warehousing. So yeah, doing that and transitioning to that was very interesting. And it was fun. I mean, and it's still fun, I'll say. But going from um kind of having this corporate structure, I guess, around you to now like creating that structure yourself and figuring out how are these operations gonna flow and getting more and more into the details, like even further than before, and being able to have almost like immediate impact on that instead of waiting for approvals and things like that has certainly made it a lot more interesting and fun, and I love that get the chance to experiment a little more, I think, because like it's my risk essentially, right? To take it. And so it's been great. We started in a small space in Philadelphia, actually, very small, actually, like just under 3,000 square feet. And yeah, I was coming from being an assistant plant manager for a building that was I think we were at just about 280,000 square feet. And we were saying that, we didn't have enough space there. And then going to like 3,000 square feet, like I'm like, damn, like I really don't have any space here, right? So I was getting like super creative on space utilization and how do we do these processes differently and things like that. And it's been a great challenge. And I think it's one that's been a lot of fun. And then we had the opportunity and the luck of meeting our now partner in the 3PL business, which is Experior Global, which has allowed us to now move into a larger space over in New Jersey, which we just did in August. And yeah, now we've kind of stabilized that with our existing client from Philadelphia and been able to take on more services for them. And then actually we're able to start doing some fulfillment out of Experior's Texas location as well. Within like the last month, we got that opportunity, and yeah, now it's just figuring about how to kind of expand upon that and do some additional development, bring in some additional clients and brands to really help them with their fulfillment process. But I mean, I love the fact that like now I can just like tinker like all I want with the different things that are going on and really embrace some of the technologies. We've had some people that I've had on the podcast who have been very like supportive and have offered for us to utilize some of their services and test some of their stuff as well within there. And that's something I think that is a cool component to it, is that in the future, as we get this thing kind of built up a little more, we'll be able to actually bring some of these solutions that we talk about into the facility, and then able to kind of showcase them and show them off through the channel in a different way, which for me is like a long-term goal for the new warehouse, is to be able to have like this space to showcase a lot of these technologies as well, almost like a demo center or something, you could say. So being able to have that fulfillment business where something live can actually be showcased as well is certainly like one of the big steps to getting there. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun. We'll be going on, I guess, 2 years in a couple months since we opened the doors. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. And it's a lot of fun to be able to get into the weeds sometimes when I want to. And it's also fun to look in the higher level too, and kind of build this business out and really kind of put the structures in place to be able to do that.
Wow. Yeah, and you touched on something that I think is so important too, which is just like your mindset, right? So
Mm,
you're going from a corporate job where you're managing 280,000 square feet, so big warehouse, and then you
yeah.
get your own, and it's 3,000 square feet.
Mhm.
And rather than like, oh man, it's just getting down or comparing or whatever, you embraced it as a fun and a way to exhibit creativity to find a way to make that work and actually grow your business. And I remember you telling me too, where it was like a nail salon, right? Where because of the way it was
Yeah.
set up, you had to unload the truck in the street and then go over to like the curb, the crosswalk, and pull the pallet up on the pallet jack, and then over to the
Yeah.
into the side door. And right, so talk about being creative, just making it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you got a good memory there, Dave. So yeah, I mean the size, I would say the size was probably the least of the challenges, to be honest. I mean, we were in like a straight up retail unit on the ground floor of an apartment building. So, and like you said, it used to be before we were there, the tenant was a nail salon. So yeah, so certainly not a traditional warehouse fulfillment space, no loading dock, but we would unload liftgate in the street to Philadelphia. And yeah, and that presented an interesting challenge, and allowed us to get creative as well. So we were using obviously no forklift, right? So we had just a manual jack at first, where we were jacking this stuff up the curb, down the alley, because in the alley we had double doors open, and that was like our I guess you could say that was our loading dock in a sense, but it was definitely not a loading dock. And just jacking the pallets in through there. And yeah, and like quickly tried to explore like options of, how do we make this process better? Like, we know that we're restricted. We know that we cannot do like a traditional forklift. We know that, we don't have a loading dock, right? But how do we make this better for the people, for myself, right? I mean, I was jacking those pallets in myself, but also for like the people I had working for me too. And so luckily, through the podcast, I knew Bill over at Big Joe, and we talked a little bit, and they had a really cool lithium powered pallet jack, small, slim profile, so ideal for like the smaller space. And we were able to get one of those, and that totally like changed the receiving process. It's a for anybody, I guess that's interested. It's an LPT 26 is the model number, and it's just like a fantastic machine. And we still use it in our existing space as well. But yeah, that just changed things totally. It was, electric powered, and some of the stuff we were doing fulfillment on was beverage too, right? So we were manually jacking full pallets of liquid basically uphill up the curb, and then through the alley and spinning it around. I mean, manually jacking something that's almost 3,000 pounds is it can be a little tough, especially when you're going uphill. So yeah, with that, I mean, it made it effortless. So we went from like having on receiving days having to have like 3 people there just to push and get these pallets in, to having, one person could just handle the unloading and bringing it in. So finding like those type of solutions to get creative about, the challenges we were presented, certainly helped to make the overall operation a lot more efficient and better. Because yeah, I mean, that way, I mean, we were getting, average delivery for us was like 6 to 8 pallets, and believe it or not, I mean, we once we kind of tweak those processes, put the right tools in place. I mean, we took in full truckload one time in one delivery. Actually, the space was like incredibly cramped, but we did it. It was for a brand. They're having a pre-Black Friday sale. But we figured out how to rearrange the space and cram all that in there and get it done for them. And we had, our highest volume day ever. So it's, the risk and the challenges and the creative solutions pay off in the end, to increase that efficiency and deliver for your clients.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how too, right? Like you're certainly detailing like some adversity and some problems and some things that, I'm sure others run into similar circumstances. And it always seems like you're very solution oriented and you just always find a way to get past it and turn that into something that's going to help you grow. Um,
Yeah.
like is that how you explain it? Or like what would you say as far as like is important for entrepreneurs to be solution oriented?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important, and I've always kind of approached it in that way. Even when I was working for other company, it was never like, I think sometimes people, like you see a challenge and it looks like a wall, but I think like instead of it just being a wall, which would be like kind of a dead end stop, right? You need to look at it as more of like a hill in a sense, right? Where, initially like it's going to be tough maybe to get up the hill, but then once you get to the top and find that solution, like, you're going downhill, like everything's moving smoothly again, right? So I've always kind of taken that approach, and I'm not one to react quickly, in a sense, like, if a challenge is presented, like I'm not gonna, have the mindset of like, oh, like, that's it, or like I'm throwing my hands up, or, no, we can't do it this way, like, it needs to be this way, like no change, nothing like that. I always kind of have a very analytical approach, I guess maybe you could say, about it, and take time to digest and understand, like, one, what is happening, right? But then two, like, why is it happening, right? Like, why are we getting this outcome? Like, let's take a step back, let's look a little further back in the process and figure out, why is this occurring like this? And then once you can do that, then you can start to see like, okay, where can we attack this? Like, because sometimes you get that challenge, and like the challenge or the pain that is being told to you is not necessarily like the actual pain point or the actual challenge, right? It may be something like further upstream. So when you start to take a look at it and evaluate the different things that are leading up to that challenge, then you can start to address it, I think in multiple different ways, and it gives you more options to be able to look at those things and really kind of figure out, how do we put something in place that's going to take away this challenge. And I think, you want to be quick to react in a sense of putting some type of solution in, but you don't want to be quick to react in an emotional way, right? You want to take your time emotionally to understand what's happening, digest, right? And then figure out and take those steps forward to be able to come up with the solution. So, I mean, I think that's been really important for me, and having that patience, maybe, and a little more poise in a sense, to before kind of approaching something and putting a solution in place. I mean, I think that's super important, because if you start to just quickly like throw things at a problem, then oftentimes, especially like from like an entrepreneur perspective, it could end up costing you more in the long run, and potentially put you in a worse spot, right? And I think additionally, when you have employees, like, it's important to understand that as well, because when you start throwing a lot of things in there, we're gonna do it this way, no, oh no, we're gonna do it this way, oh, we're gonna do it this way, like, then the employees are kind of like, yeah, like, well, what's going on here, like, do we know what we're doing, right? And they get like a little frustrated. And change management is like a huge part of warehousing and operations. Like, you have to be careful, like, how often, how quickly you're changing processes, and how you're communicating those too. So I think, that goes back to like making sure that like you're fully understanding, digesting, and then proposing that solution, and explaining why you're doing that, especially when you have employees like you would have in a warehouse fulfillment business. So yeah, I mean, that mindset has certainly helped me, I think, not only just on my own with my business, but also throughout my career, additionally, to be able to go about things maybe a little more thoughtfully, and not put something in place just to put something in place, right?
And I think that's so important too, just being aware of, again, right, your strengths, like the patience, the
Mhm.
analytical thinking, and then seeing, okay, well, how can I use that to apply it? Because a lot of people wouldn't necessarily react that way, and they may get emotional, or they may be more of like a high energy and they just want to like attack the problem head on. But when you sit back and think about it and you're more methodical in your approach, I mean, certainly that's worked for you with the solution and everything you've put in place.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you've certainly grown this podcast and your network considerably from where you started, and now you have the 3PL in full swing. What's what are you most excited about coming up in the next 12 months for your businesses?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think I'm most excited. Uh, Definitely. So this last year has been exciting because I haven't had like the regular 9 to 5, so I was able to go to more trade shows. So I'm definitely excited to embrace those more, going into 2024. So definitely excited for the trade shows and what we're gonna do there. We're gonna be at Manifest and Modex, and the Retail Supply Chain Logistics Expo. As of right now, we're committed to having a booth there. We'll be doing like live streams, podcasts on the floor, similar to what we did with you at Home Delivery World, Dave. But yeah, in terms of exciting stuff, we're definitely excited to, with the podcast, explore more video types of things, and also start to build out more um, resources. I guess is what I could say. We're looking at, what does that look like right now, but building out things that people in the industry can can reference to find these technologies and solutions in a better way, maybe easier way. And then on the 3PL side, we're definitely excited. We're going to be making like a big push to bring in more clients going into the new year. So definitely excited to do that and kind of push more onto the sales side of things and really start to build that out and get more things happening within that facility and really kind of grow the business overall. I think this year spent a lot of time developing the systems and the processes for both the podcast side and for the 3PL side. So really looking forward to kind of 2024 embracing that and trying to push further to grow the business.
Wow, outstanding. All right, so if people want to get in touch, they want to learn more about your podcast or your 3PL or anything else that you're doing, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Yeah, I mean, the best way I would say is to follow me on LinkedIn, Kevin Lawton. I'm very active on there, and you can message me on there as well. And for all things podcast, you can definitely head to thenewwarehouse.com or find the podcast on any podcast platform that's out there.
Okay. All right. Well, there you have it, everyone. Once again, I want to thank you so much, Kevin Lawton, for being a guest this week on the show. That's all the time we have, and we will see you next time. Thank you. Hello again, Dave Goulas here. Thank you for tuning in to the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. If you like what you heard on today's episode and you got value from it, please click the link below to subscribe so you'll be notified of future episodes when they drop. If you would like to be a guest on a future show, you can also click the link below, or you can email us at info@beyondfulfillmentpodcast.com. That's info@beyondfulfillmentpodcast.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.